Hello, my name is Will Boswinkle, and if you are seeing this, this is my presentation for History 104. This is my final project, and it is a crash course on the history of esports. I did this because I wanted to tackle an issue with esports while being able to talk about it, like to talk about it in a world context. That has been a common issue in my first two projects. So yeah, without further ado, one thing I would like to mention though before we start this presentation, this is only a visual aid. It's for to help me guide along the presentation, and this is actually the outline. It has the footnotes, it has the citations, it has everything like that. That's weird. Okay. So yeah. Please look at this instead of the presentation for a lot more information. And without further ado, let's give you guys a crash course on the history of esports. So present. Okay, so esports is competitive gaming in an organized manner. Currently, it is a worldwide phenomenon. It's selling out major arenas like Madison Square Garden, and according to Forbes, as an industry, it is set to surpass $1 billion in terms of revenue by around 2020. With that being said, esports, a lot of people think that esports was an overnight success when in fact it wasn't. I think the reason people do not think esports as highly is that it does not have a history, that people don't think that there's a huge history around it like basketball, like baseball, or any other traditional sport. It is a situation that many esports players have had to face. For example, Clinton Fear Loomis, a pro Dota 2 player, his mom had to say this: when your child wants to become a professional gamer, you don't have a history to look back on like other esports. I don't know anyone who's made a living at gaming. This was in 2011. There was around 30 years of history prior to that. And so today so a lot of people think that esports, yeah, started out very recently, but in fact it has been around since the 1970s, the 1980s. So it's disrespectful for people to hop on the esports bandwagon without knowing about the history of esports, because without that history, esports would not be here and what it is today. So esports has an extremely rich history with amazing competition, scandals, teams, and players that in a short amount of time has pushed esports into the mainstream. So the first kind of competitive gaming was the high score attacks. The first game that introduced the high score was Space Invaders. Space Invaders was kind of pioneer for the arcade because this was the game that introduced the high score. Space Invaders brought that challenge, like, I have to beat his score. It was one of the first ways that people were able to measure how good they were compared to other people. So the first ever big esports competition was the Atari World Championships. This is that right there. The main game was Space Invaders, and the goal was to have the highest score. It had a $50,000 prize pool. Unfortunately, the first major esports event was also one of esports' first controversies, as they never paid out, so they did not disperse the $50,000. Esports' first star was this guy right here, Billy Mitchell. He had many records like Pac-Man, Centipede, Miss Pac-Man, Donkey Kong, stuff like that. Unfortunately, esports' first star was also part of controversy when he was caught cheating, as he tampered with the arcade equipment, allowing him to essentially save, and if he died, he was able to go back to that point. Twin Galaxies was also an organization that kept track of high scores. So in the 1990s, there was a big growth in esports. The main game was Quake and Street Fighter. So the best Street Fighter player of that era was Diego Umahara, and in 1997 he won a Japanese national tournament, and Alex Valle, this guy right here, he won an American national tournament. So Capcom was like, let's have these guys face off in the first true international competition. Yeah. And because Atari, that world championship was false actually. It was really only for Americans because all the host cities were American cities. Also during that time was Quake, which was a first-person shooter by ID Software. And they produced the first ever really crazy prize, which was John Carmack's, one of ID's Software's founders and Quake developer, gave his red Ferrari up for prize, which was won by this guy right here, Dennis Thresh Fong. And also during that time, while gaming was big in Europe and gaming was big in Japan and America, esports' first true organization that has lasted, SK Gaming, was founded. So it's really interesting to see that a European team was the first major esports organization. So in the 2000s, while esports was still like relatively small in the West and the rest of the world, in South Korea it boomed, specifically with Blizzard's StarCraft Brood War. Media companies such as On Media and NBC Plus launched their own television channels to broadcast Brood War competitions. The best players were hailed as gods and called Banjwa. These are Boxer, Nada, Flash, and Savior. All of them are Banjwa, Savior being a former Banjwa. And these were the best players. They were very mainstream. Reportedly, Boxer even had a fan club of over 600,000. And it's interesting because esports players in the West, they didn't have that really kind of respect. Unfortunately, even the Banjwa were not immune to being part of controversies. Savior was actually caught up in a match fixing scandal. Him, along with 10 other players, were banned from Korean Esports Association or KESPA tournaments, where they are still banned, and some of them even face jail time. This was a big shock in South Korea because esports is kind of sacred to them. They love esports there. So while in South Korea it wasn't uncommon to be able to watch esports, in the West we didn't really have that until Major League Gaming come along, or MLG. They, while having their own tournaments that were very professional and very professionalized, their biggest contribution was being able to watch these competitions, which is MLG TV, and it was the first way in the West to consistently watch gaming competitions. So while the East was producing stars left and right, and they were very mainstream, the first major esports star that we know was Jonathan Fatality Wendell. He got mainstream attention. He was even on MTV. Mikhail Blishars, a journalist for esports, said this about Fatality's contributions. Gamers like Fatality, who are very, very successful, especially from a financial point of view, are really very good examples for young people of what you can do if they're very talented and very motivated. He inspired a whole generation of esports players. So the other 5 I wanted to mention are the 5 gods of Melee. This is Adam Armada Lingard, Joseph Mango Marquez, Jason Mewtwo King Zimmerman, Juan Hungrybox Demita, and Kevin PPMD Nanny. They were literally called the 5 gods for a period of time from 2008 to 2015. If any 2 of them entered a tournament, one of them always won. So yeah, they were very dominant during that time. So on to the 2010s. In 2011, Valve released the International 2011, which had an amazing story as a surprising European team, not as Vincere, ended up winning the $1 million. This was notable because $1 million for an esports competition was unheard of at the time. They beat the heavily favored eHome. Also in 2011, Riot Games released League of Legends, which produced Faker. Faker is considered to be the greatest player of all time. He has 5 international tournament wins, 3 of which were world championships. It also broke, in 2014, it was the first esports in the West to break traditional sports ratings. 27 million watched the League of Legends Finals, which beat out the NBA Finals Game 7s and World Series Game 7s for that year. However, esports is still wrought with controversy as iBuyPower got caught up in a match-fixing scandal. All players involved except one, so 9 players in total, got caught up in this, and they have lifetime bans from any Valve CSGO tournaments. So recently in 2015, ESPN took their first foray into esports competitions with Heroes of the Storm, which is a Heroes of the Storm by Blizzard competition. Even though it was met with backlash, they still continued doing 2016 and 2017. ESPN is the worldwide leader of sports, so the fact that they did this was, so the fact that it got broadcast on ESPN sort of legitimized esports competitions to the West, and it allowed TV channels like TBS to broadcast competitions. South America, well, I was talking about Europe, Asia, and America a lot. South America didn't really have a star until Gonzalez Zero Barrios from Chile came to America, and in Super Smash Bros. 4 went on an incredible 56 tournament winning streak. Meanwhile, in Korea, esports was still as big as ever, and their best game is the StarCraft series. And a Finnish player by the name of Huna Sero Sotala toppled the dynasty as he was the first non-Korean to win a BlizzCon being their world championships. And it's interesting to see a European actually topple the dynasty. Every so often, a Korean would not win an international tournament, but usually they would win. And however, they would always win at BlizzCon until Cyril ended that reign. And recently, Comcast decided to build a dedicated arena to an esports team, the Philadelphia Fusion, which will be in the Philadelphia Sports Complex. And this is huge because the only other country to have dedicated arenas to esports teams is China. So people just see esports as something that only started recently. However, for the past couple of decades, we have seen crazy prizes like in 2018, $25.5 million was the prize pool for that year's international, and Red Ferrari was a prize. We've seen amazing players like Sero, like Zero, like the 5 gods of Smash Bros. Melee, like Flash, like Boxer. And esports was not an overnight success. It took a long, bumpy, and winding road to get to this point. It has an amazing history. And that is it. This is where the presentation stops. Thank you for watching. If you want to know more about esports or want to start watching esports, you can email me at willboz@udel.edu. Thank you for your time. Remember that this is the outline and this is just a visual aid. Everything will be turned in. Thank you.